Chosen one, this instant is not arbitrary, and your presence here is not an accident. Heaven arranged this encounter with exactness because what is being addressed now meets you at the precise edge of timing. Chosen one, you were summoned here because something long restrained has arrived at its appointed hour. What was postponed has not been rejected. What was concealed has been preserved. What was opposed has already been determined in heaven. Anointed one, there were hands that attempted to restrict your future and voices that attempted to normalize lack, but none of them were consulted when the divine rendered the verdict. Scripture reminds us that the vision pauses for the appointed duration and will surely arrive. And that duration is now developing around you. You are standing at the threshold of supernatural transformation, where elevation is sudden, provision is exact, and restoration shifts faster than clarification. This is not ambition. This is harmony. This is not excess. This is inheritance arriving into form. Chosen one, what is approaching is not merely financial. It is authority returning to its rightful location. Years of stretching, restraint, and silent trust were not squandered. They calibrated you to hold what is being discharged without forfeiting your center. Heaven is correcting what was restricted, and the correction is irreversible. Sometimes divine reminders do not arrive with commotion or dispute, but through something quiet and steady that holds you when expressions fall short. What has been prepared rests here waiting, without demand already established in location. Chosen one, what occurs next is not symbolic, and it is not motivational language meant to soothe you. This is the instant when heaven interrupts what is sensed like a sealed structure. When the divine determines, the determination does not negotiate with timelines, opinions, or previous outcomes. It overrides them. You are standing in a location where groundwork meets permission. You were not preserved through lack to remain there. You were purified there so you would not collapse when discharge arrived. Anointed one, I require you to comprehend this plainly. Poverty was never your essence. Battle was never your assignment. It was a corridor, not a terminus. I have journeyed seasons where every calculation mattered, where quietness was heavier than responses, where trust had to be practiced without applause. Those seasons did not mean heaven was remote. They meant heaven was deliberate. What sensed like postponement was calibration. What sensed like rejection was harmony quietly taking form. Chosen one, the spaces you are about to enter will sense unfamiliar because scarcity trained you to anticipate resistance. You absorbed, embraced instead of obtained. But now the stance must alter. You are not journeying into locations where you possess to convince anyone. You are journeying into spaces where your presence clarifies itself. Portals will open without dispute. Dialogues will transform without effort. Possibilities will arrive already determined. This is what it means to be held by favor rather than driven by force. Anointed one, there were individuals who addressed about you as though your narrative was completed. I recognize how that senses because I have absorbed my identity addressed in past tense while I was still standing. They assumed the quietness meant stagnation. They mistook restraint for collapse. But heaven never confuses quiet with weakness. Scripture reminds us that what is concealed for a duration is disclosed at the appointed hour, and your hour is no longer remote. Chosen one, every night you stayed alert, stretching what little you possessed was not squandered effort. It was confirmation of stewardship. Every time you provided when it cost you something, heaven took notice. Every instant you selected endurance over resentment. Something was added to you that cannot be purchased. Individuals assumed you were surviving. The divine recognized you were being trained. This is why what is approaching will not undo you. It will not inflate you beyond your grounding. It will expand you without erasing who you are. Anointed one, there is a distinction between sudden wealth and divine transfer. Sudden wealth shocks the unprepared. Divine transfer settles in the hands of those who have already absorbed restraint, meekness, and understanding. You have existed genuine existence. You have navigated disappointment. You have survived misunderstanding. That is why what is approaching will not own you. You will own it, not for display, but for harmony, not for status, but for assignment. Chosen one. Some of the rejection you encountered was protection disguised as deficit. If certain portals had opened earlier, you would have entered too small. If certain connections had remained, they would have drained what was meant to be preserved. The divine does not merely favor outcomes. Vessels are protected. This is why the route narrowed before it widened. This is why interruptions fell away before provision accelerated. Anointed one, absorb this with understanding. Heaven is not rewarding flawlessness. Heaven is honoring persistence. You persisted journeying when surrendering would have been understandable. You remained receptive when sealing would have been simpler. That endurance holds authority, and authority attracts provision. This is why structures are transforming around you now. This is why individuals are considering you without recognizing why. This is why solutions are forming before problems even surface. Chosen one. What is approaching will respond to questions individuals inquired in secret. They will not be capable to trace the source because it was never meant to be traced. It was meant to be witnessed. Your existence will commence to address the manners your expressions never had to, and you will not require to clarify yourself. Evidence does not dispute. It simply stands. Anointed one, I am not addressing from theory. I have witnessed how the divine restores equilibrium when the scales have leaned too far into deficit. I have observed understanding return after bewilderment lingered too extended. I have sensed provision arrive without stress after seasons where effort brought little return. That transformation does not arrive with commotion. It arrives with certainty. And once it commences, it does not reverse. Chosen one, this section of your journey concludes here, not with applause, but with harmony, not with intensity, but with authority. What develops next will send steady, deliberate, and unmistakably directed. Remain present here, because what follows constructs directly on what has already been determined. Chosen one. There is an explanation of demand intensified right before matters commence to transform. Resistance always discloses proximity. When something valuable is about to surface, friction increases. Not because you are accomplishing something incorrect, but because what is emerging holds weight. You are not overlooked. You are being protected. Heaven does not hasten what must endure. It stabilizes it first. Anointed one, I want you to acknowledge this pattern. Just before portals open, voices become louder. Uncertainty becomes more persuasive. Exhaustion settles into the body. You commence questioning determinations that once seemed certain. This is not collapse. This is transition. I have stood in that space myself, where understanding sensed close, but invisible where advancement was internal long before it became visible. That space is holy ground, even when its senses uncomfortable. Chosen one, the structures that once resisted you are now adjusting around you. You may not witness it yet, but harmony is already in motion. Dialogues are occurring without your presence. Determinations are being made that include your identity without your effort. This is how divine order labors. When the divine determines, announcement does not occur to everyone. Activation occurs quietly and permits reality to catch up. Anointed one, there were seasons when you attempted harder and obtained less. That was not squandered energy. That was purification. You absorb perception. You absorb timing. You absorb how to acknowledge the distinction between possibility and interruption. Many individuals obtain resources before they develop understanding, and the resources undo them. You were protected from that outcome. What seems like postponement was compassion in disguise. Chosen one, notice how your tolerance for disorder is altered. Matters that once drained you now repel you. Dialogues that once held your focus now sense hollow. This is not arrogance. This is elevation in consciousness. When you rise internally, misalignment becomes uncomfortable. The divine does not only alter your circumstances, sensitivity is upgraded so you can maintain what arrives. Anointed one, I have absorbed that genuine provision does not arrive with alarm. It arrives with tranquility. When something is forced, it demands intensity. When something is ordained, it brings calmness. The transformation you are entering will not sense frantic. It will sense settled. Even if the scale astonishes you, that tranquility is validation. That steadiness is evidence. Chosen one, the dread that murmurs, what if it disappears, arise from old survival patterns. Those patterns were necessary once. They maintained you alert. They maintained you shifting. But they are not meant to guide you forward. Provision sustained by dread always leaks. Provision sustained by reliance stabilizes. This is why the divine addressed your inner world before addressing your outer one, anointed one. Some individuals will battle to comprehend your transition because they only recognize you in your restraint. They became comfortable with your limitation. Your expansion will challenge their assumptions, and that is not your responsibility to manage. Development always disrupts old agreements. You are not demanded to remain small to maintain others comfortable. Chosen one, I want to address directly to the instant you question yourself, the nights you replayed dialogues, the days you questioned if you forfeited something. Heaven did not miscalculate you. Heaven accounted for every postponement, every detour, every silent season. Nothing was squandered. Nothing requires to be recovered. Everything is being integrated. Anointed one, the favor approaching to you is not fragile. It does not depend on flawless behavior or constant effort. It rests on harmony. When harmony is present, support becomes sustainable. This is why what is forming now will not collapse under demand. It possesses structure. It possesses timing. It possesses back and beyond what is visible. Chosen one, there is a distinction between being fortunate and being positioned. Fortune is inconsistent. Positioning is deliberate. You were positioned through endurance, through compliance, through selecting integrity when shortcuts were available. That positioning holds authority. Authority attracts cooperation. Cooperation generates flow. Anointed one, you may notice that assistance arrives from unexpected locations. Solutions surface without pursuit. This is not happenstance. This is the environment responding to your internal transformation. When understanding stabilizes, bewilderment forfeits sway. When trajectory sharpens, resistance weakens. Chosen one, the next phase of your existence will sense less like struggling and more like stewardship, less like proving and more like obtaining. That does not mean there will be no responsibility. It means the responsibility will sense proportional instead of overwhelming. You are prepared for this because you absorb restraint before abundance. Anointed one, remember this. The same divine presence who sustained you in lack will direct you in overflow. Consistency does not alter when circumstances alter. That consistency is your anchor. You are not entering uncertainty. You are entering expansion with oversight. Chosen one, pause here. Permit was been addressed to settle. The next layer constructs on this foundation, and it develops with exactness, not haste. Chosen one, there is a quiet recalibration occurring inside you that most individuals will never notice. And that is by design. Before the divine alters external flow, internal stance is stabilized. You are not merely stepping into increase. You are being adjusted. So increase does not pull you off center. This is why your reactions have altered. Matters that once triggered intensity now invite perception. Scenarios that once demanded clarification now obtain quietness. That is not retreat. That is authority settling in. Anointed one, I have absorbed through existing encounter that when the divine prepares to elevate someone, the requirement to be witness reduces. Focus forfeits its grip. Validation halts being fuel. You commence to care more about harmony than applause. This transformation does not occur by willpower. It occurs because survival instructed you what mattered and endurance stripped away what did not. That stripping was not deficit. It was purification. Chosen one. There were instants you sensed invisible and assumed it meant you were being bypassed. In reality, you were being positioned where imitation could not follow. Heaven often conceals what it plans to highlight later. If your rise had arrived early, it would have been crowded. What is approaching now will be clean. It will not demand performance. It will not require clarification. It will simply develop. Anointed one, notice how your forbearance has deepened. You no longer hasten determinations merely to relieve discomfort. You can sit with uncertainty without alarm. That capacity is rare, and it is expensive to acquire. Most individuals never develop it because they escape demand instead of absorbing from it. You remained, you absorbed, you adapted without hardening. That is why what arrives next will not overwhelm you. Chosen one, some of the individuals who doubted you were not malicious. They were limited by their own frameworks. They could not imagine expansion without force because force was all they recognized. But heaven does not function by strain. It functions by order. When order harmonizes, provision flows naturally. You are entering a season where effort decreases and effectiveness increases. Anointed one. There were sacrifices you made quietly, selections you did not announce, integrity determinations that cost you access in the short term. Those instants were registered even when nobody affirmed them. Scripture instructs that what is accomplished in secret is witnessed, and you are commencing to witness what witness trust produces. This is not repayment. It is acknowledgement. Chosen one, I want to ground this for you. I have observed provision arrive after extended restraint, not with disorder, but with tranquility, not with demand, but with exactness. When it arrived, it did not sense like triumph in a race. It sensed like stepping into a space already prepared. That is a texture of divine supply. It does not shock the nervous structure. It stabilizes it. Anointed one. The understanding forming now will shield you from misaligned possibilities. Not every open portal is assignment. Not every offer is provision. You are being provided the perception to communicate the distinction. This is why your spirit tightens around certain options and relaxes around others. Rely on that marker. It has been trained. Chosen one. There's also a discharge occurring around shame. Old stories that attempted to define you by what you lacked are forfeiting power. You are no longer interpreting your value through scarcity. That internal transformation alters everything. When shame exits, reception becomes achievable. You cannot hold abundance while disputing with your value. That dispute is concluding. Anointed one, do not be astonished if some relationships fall silent. Quietness is not always rejection. Sometimes it is repositioning. As you harmonize, your frequency alters. Not everyone can follow that transformation, and that is not a collapse. It is sorting. The divine often simplifies the environment before multiplying the supply. Chosen one, what you are stepping into will not demand that you desert who you are. It will demand that you respect it. You will not require to become louder, harder, or sharper. You will become clearer. Understanding holds more power than force ever could. That understanding will direct determinations, finances, and partnerships with minimal friction. Anointed one, you may notice that your petitions are altering. Less pleading, more absorbing, less intensity, more agreement. That is not because you care less. It is because reliance has substituted anxiety. When reliance stabilizes, petition becomes harmony instead of negotiation. Chosen one, this is not the season to look back and evaluate yourself against what could have been. That comparison dissolves authority. Everything you required was constructed in sequence. Nothing is late. Nothing is forfeited. Nothing requires to be pursued. What is yours is approaching with design. Anointed one. There will be instants ahead that sense almost ordinary yet hold extraordinary impact. A dialogue that appears casual. A determination that senses simple. A yes that does not demand battle. Focus on those instants. Divine movement often disguises itself as ease. Chosen one, permit this to settle without hastening forward. The next section will disclose how to acknowledge what is arriving without gripping it. Remain here, steady and present, because momentum is being constructed quietly and exactly. Your rise is not revenge. It is revelation. It discloses a hand of divine upon your existence, and the certainty that what is determined in heaven cannot be undone by earth. You are not arriving by force or favor from individuals. You are arriving by harmony. This is your kairos instant, the exact duration appointed for what has been preserved to shift into form. What attempted to limit you has forfeited its authority, and what was postponed is now active, alive, and developing. Anointed one. A supernatural transfer is already in motion, not hastened but certain, not delayed but precise, and you are positioned to obtain it completely. Chosen one. There arrives a point in the journey where the fire quiets, not because it is extinguished, but because it has shifted deeper. This is the section few individuals address. The commitment is still alive, but the adrenaline has diminished. The certainty remains, but the days sense ordinary again. This is where endurance is formed, not through intensity, but through return. Return to what you recognize is accurate, even when nothing fresh appears to be occurring. Anointed one. This is a season where trust is no longer theatrical. It is steady. It surfaces in small determinations, repeated petitions, quiet restraint. It appears like arising and accomplishing what requires to be accomplished even when stimulation is absent. I recognize this space well. It is where I absorb that pausing does not mean idling. It means remaining available without forcing movement. Chosen one. Exhaustion does not mean you are collapsing. It means you have been holding weight for an extended duration. Even those summoned for significant matters develop tired in the in-between. Scripture addresses of those who pause through extended stretches without visible alteration, not because heaven overlooked, but because timing was still harmonizing. Fatigue does not disqualify you. It discloses that you remain when departing would have been simpler. Anointed one. Some days trust appears like remembering instead of trusting again. You remember what you sensed when understanding first arrived. You remember how certain the inner yes was. You remember the calmness that arrived without evidence. That recollection is not nostalgia. It is an anchor. When sentiment fluctuates, remembrance stabilizes. Chosen one. There were mornings when nothing appeared to shift, yet you still selected integrity. There were weeks when advancements installed, yet you refused shortcuts. Those instants did not sense powerful, but they were formative. Power that endures is constructed quietly. Loud trust burns rapidly. Enduring trust absorbs how to breathe under demand. Anointed one. I have existed seasons where the only matter sustaining me was steadiness, not exhilaration, not responses, merely the determination to return again to what grounded me. To surface even when motivation was thin, to rely that invisible labor was occurring even when nothing validated it. Those were not holidays. They were root days. Chosen one. This is where many individuals desert what they were summoned to hold, not because they halted trusting, but because they developed tired of holding something without confirmation. You remain. You did not collapse into cynicism. You did not harden into resentment. That selection matters more than you recognize. Anointed one. Pausing matures a commitment. It extracts entitlement. It burns away intensity that would have fractured you later. What is being prepared must match who you have become, not who you were when you first absorbed it. This is why heaven does not hasten the discharge. It shields both the gift and the holder. Chosen one, there are ordinary instants that hold more weight than theatrical ones. Washing dishes while petitioning quietly, sitting in quietness when responses do not arrive, selecting rest instead of alarm. These are not interruptions from trust. They are trust existed in the body. They train the nervous structure to remain steady when favor arrives. Anointed one, trust is often steady through simple, repeatable remy. Chosen one, permit this to settle. You are prepared. The pausing has accomplished its labor. The endurance has formed you, and the commitment you are holding is no longer fragile. It is rooted. Your rise is not revenge. It is revelation, and you are prepared to journey in it completely.